This is a special edition of the Takedown with Nick, and we're going to have Leopold with us. We're going to be speaking about the issue of inequality and why it's important to people who may not understand or may not think that is important to them and how it relates. We have Leopold with us. He's a prolific writer. He's done quite a bit of things. I've read at least 2 or 3 of his books, but the one that we'll be talking about today will be the book Runaway, Inequality. Let's have Les introduce himself. Hello, Les. How you doing?
Fine. Nick, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful for you to take this time to come and spend with us and speak to us about this issue. This is an issue that's really, critical that we really have a discussion about this issue and kind of flesh out, some of the things that have been going on. So what I want to start off with is just what made you make this realization, or what made you connect the dots, so to speak, in your politics that brought you to the point where you are today?
Well, I've been doing a lot of writing about Wall Street, and I've been focusing on, the perils of Wall Street for the economy and how they're ripping us off and this and that. And then what got me going was my son was doing an internship with Fight for $15 an hour wage campaign in New York. And he comes home and he says, he's walking around New York and there are all these people sleeping on the street. And he goes, what's going on here? How can the richest country on earth not have the ability to feed and clothe its own people? He was just like stunned by this. So I started thinking about it and I thought, well, I was looking for something to write about. And I started thinking about maybe I'll write about homelessness. But when I looked at it more deeply, I realized that everything was connected through runaway inequality. I realized that inequality had been getting worse and worse and worse, and that virtually every issue that I cared about, and I thought most people cared about, was connected through runaway inequality. That it wasn't just a single issue. It wasn't just a issue amongst other issues. It was the issue that tied everything together. So that led me to start researching the book about 2 years ago. And I started testing out chapters on Alternate and Huffington Post just to see what kind of response I got. I got a really good response. I was surprised. So I put a draft together. And this is all before Bernie Sanders. Had no connection whatsoever with Bernie Sanders. Had no idea he was going to run. He doesn't know who I am. Well, maybe he does now, but he wasn't consulting with me or anything like that on issues.
Mm-hmm.
So about a year ago, spring, I was asked by the Communication Workers of America to run 5 half-day workshops for some of their key activists, Verizon workers, who were in their political action committees, just rank and file people. And I said, sure, I'd be glad to do it, but can I use this book as a text? And they said, sure. I said, it's only in draft form. And so we passed it out. And by the end of the class, we asked people, we went around the room and said, well, how many copies of this book would you like for your local and this kind of stuff? Figuring, well, maybe we can eventually get them 20, 30 books or something like that. And they came back and they said 3,100. It added up to 3,100 books. They were so excited. So that told me not that the book was so great, but it told me that the issue was right on the money. Then some people who had come to visit that class were from Citizen Action New York. They had a big conference and they wanted to reprint in draft form with all the proofreading mistakes and everything else. They wanted 600 copies. Next thing I knew, the CWA, Communication Workers, put up $1 million to train. They bought 14,000 copies of the book. They trained, we're in the process of training 80 of their people to be trainers, and they're taking 1,000 people out of work for a whole day, paying them to run through a class on runaway inequality. Meanwhile, the Sanders campaign takes off, and runaway inequality is the central theme of the Sanders campaign. And he virtually, I joke about this, that it's like he stole all the proposals at the back of the book. He field tested them. He came up with them on his own, I'm sure. But he went and tested all the tax on Wall Street, to pay for free higher education. That's one of the proposals in the book. Try, how do you deal with runaway inequality? You have to move money from where it is, which is from Wall Street, back into Main Street. So he then, not only did he take the proposals, but he showed that they had tremendous resonance with people all across the country. So meanwhile, we moved 30,000 copies of the book, and we're spreading the trainer program to New Jersey, Washington State, various other places, and having trouble keeping up with it. So it's been very fulfilling. None of the money goes to me personally; it goes back to the Labor Institute where I work, and it goes into basically a fund there to support more education and more development. So, for example, we're going to be printing 5,000 copies of the Spanish version of the book. So it's being translated to Spanish right now, so that immigrant groups can use it. But the key thing is, one of the key concepts is, as we were talking before, is not only is the problem enormous, we have to understand what the book's about is how we got there. We're not going to have time on this interview to take people through that story. I do these 1 to 2 hour workshops all over the country doing that. And I'd love to do that online sometime, but the key is, how do we overcome this? And that kind of takes us into the heart of the primaries, elections, and the election year, but also beyond, which is basically over the last 40 years, runaway inequality took hold in the economy and it's become increasingly severe. So, for example, all the new economic growth that's taken place since 2008, there's been a recovery since the Great Crash. All the new growth, 95% of that income has gone to the top 1%. So even when the economy is recovering, it's not going to everybody else. And this isn't just a white working class issue. The people who are being screwed the most are the people at the bottom of the income ladder, regardless of race, color, or creed. They're the ones that suffer the most from runaway inequality.